In 1745, a local rector named John Egerton had a boat built to take his guests on a private tour along the River Wye. He didn't know it at the time, but those events would spark the beginning of British tourism, and the River Wye boat tour would boom in popularity over the next century. Throughout these videos, I'm going to be following the route that those boats took from Ross-on-Wye, which is where I am right now, to Chepstow, way down south of the magnificent Wye Valley, which these days is an area of outstanding natural beauty. Now, there will be one key difference between my tour and the ones that happened 250 years ago, and that is the transportation. Rather than a boat on the water, I'll be taking my car, but I will of course be following the river and visiting many of the wondrous places that made these excursions so popular. We'll be learning about the history of the river tour, the people whose vision and dedication made it all possible, and in many cases drew inspiration from the valley and the surrounding area. We'll be seeing firsthand the glory of the river bends, walking up to picturesque viewpoints, stopping by historic ruined abbeys and abandoned villages, and even staying in some of the small towns and villages where those original tours would dock for the night. So without any further ado, let's begin the voyage from Ross-on-Wye to Chepstow, from England to Wales, and from the 21st century to the 18th. Consider joining me. So just behind me now is St Mary's Church, which is where John Egerton was rector between 1745 and 1750 when he left to become the Dean of Hereford. I've just been inside the church itself, picked up a free guide leaflet on the way in, and it was a really nice traditional church. It was good to look around. It's the first time that I can remember seeing a table area set up, a little bit like a little cafe. I would imagine that they have coffee mornings there sometimes. They started building the church in 1284, so over 700 years ago, so it's steeped in history. And originally when it was built, it had a Gothic architecture and appearance, but two major Victorian restorations in 1862 and 1878 have adapted the medieval work from what it was originally. There is a really spooky looking graveyard out here as well, containing lots of old tombstones and headstones, many of them in pretty bad condition just because of their age. While I'm here, let me also tell you that Ross-on-Wye hasn't always been called Ross-on-Wye. It was just Ross up till about 100 years ago. These days it has a population of about 10,000 people. So I think what I'm going to do now is take a walk through the war cemetery down towards the water. We're going to visit in just a couple of moments the spot where the boats would launch from to take that epic voyage down the river. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about another name that is synonymous with the Wye River boat tours, and that is William Gilpin. He took the tour in 1770 and he was blown away by it, even writing at the time, "If you have never navigated the Wye, you have seen nothing." He was responsible for publishing Britain's first travel guidebook entitled Observations on the River Wye and several parts of South Wales. He published that in 1782. By that time the tours had already become quite popular, and after the guidebook was published they became even more so. As Ross-on-Wye was the start of the tour, tourists would gather here the night before, usually staying in the Royal Hotel overlooking the waterfront. And it would have been around about that time where 8 or more tour boats, it was so popular, would be waiting the morning after down here by the waterside, ready to take the tourists on an epic 2-day voyage. So just to the right of me now is the Hope and Anchor Public House. And just in front of that, to my left, is the area where the boats would have left from all those years ago. And you can imagine people getting onto these wooden crafts, heading out into the waters and setting sail for the south. I've just walked about 15 minutes along a riverside path to the little village of Wilton, which is behind me. In fact, this is the first river bend that the tourists would have seen from the boat. Behind them, they would have seen the Royal Hotel and Ross-on-Wye, which is where they would have left a few moments prior. And ahead of them, on the right-hand side, a 12th century ruined castle at the time. These days, it's privately owned, so you only get to see it if you walk along the river or own a drone, as I found out. And then as the river turns left, it goes underneath Wilton Bridge and proceeds on up the River Wye. It looks like we're going to get a few showers coming across. It is just starting to rain, so I'm going to head back to the car, get on the road towards the next stop. But before I do, I just wanted to tell you what my inspiration was for this little video series on the Wye Valley riverboat tour, and that was a brochure or a tourist guide that I picked up from the website. It gives you loads of information about all the places, the route, the history. A fantastic guide, so I'm basing these videos on that, and if you want to have a read for yourself or learn more, then I'll link to it in the description below. Right now though, gonna get out this rain, get back to the car. Following a brief but very violent shower where I've had to sit in the car for about 10 minutes waiting for the heavy rain to stop, I am now walking up the little pathway towards Goodrich Castle, which William Gilpin in his travel guide described as the first grand scene of the River Wye boat tour. These days it is a National Trust property and it costs £10 for an adult to get in and £3 parking, so I have paid the price. I don't do things by half, and I am currently walking up towards the ruins. This is the barbican of the fortification, and a barbican was essentially a part of the castle that was reinforced because they thought it was somehow vulnerable. This area was vulnerable because it was the entrance and exit. So it contained additional defences such as a drawbridge, a small gate and a guardhouse to look over people who were trying to come into the castle. So I think what we're going to do is head inside now and take a quick look around. The castle itself was built by French nobleman William de Valence in around about the late 13th century. It was a powerful and imposing fortification and had all the latest features for its time, including drawbridges, arrow loops, and 2 concentric curtain walls. You can see as I walk around just how imposing and large the castle actually is. And I should also note that this castle was so grand, so magnificent, that it was the first time that the tourists actually were encouraged to get out of the boat and walk up here to take a closer look at the ruins and what was left of this very grand, once upon a time, castle. Lucky enough to have lots of first-hand accounts as to what it was like to actually take that riverboat tour, because back in those days lots of people kept diaries and journals of what they were doing and seeing on the river. One of those people was Mary Ann Hibbert, and in 1823 she wrote, "After spending about 2 hours and taking 2 sketches amongst the ruins, we returned to our boat, ate some bread and cheese, and began to think of enjoying ourselves when a storm came aptly through to remind us of the instability of all human pleasures." Other writers wrote about the tall grass and muddy fields, not to mention the really steep climb it would take to get from the harbour where the rivers docked up to the castle here on top of the hill. What an interesting place, but there was plenty of people back then that would complain because as you got closer to the castle on the river, you couldn't see it. It was too high, there were trees in the way, and that's still true today, but I think some of the trees have gone and you do get a little bit of a better view, but it is still a wonderful place to be. And I am now going to head back to the boat, the car, and press on to our next stop.
Road closed, mate. Yeah, it's closed. I went all the way to the top and then, yeah, it's closed.
I'm now on Symonds Yat Trail and I'm heading up to the viewpoint, which is about 400 metres from the car park. It's just cost £3 to park for 2 hours. I think it's £4 for 4 hours, and that should give me enough time to get up to the view and then have a walk along by the river. What we're about to see at the view is what William Gilpin described in his tour book as the second grand scene of the River Wye boat tour. The boats would dock at a place called Coldwell Rocks, where some of the tourists would have picnics and relax for a bit, and others would head up here to pick out some of the best views of the Wye Valley. There are a few things to see around here if you want to expand your trip. There are some really good hiking routes and also some cycling routes through the forest. And then from what I can make out, there's 2 really interesting villages, Symonds Yat East, which is what I'm close to, and Symonds Yat West, which is on the other side of the river. And here we go. I think we've just about made it to the top, and on my left hand side I can already see the views opening up. Take a look at that. That's the village over there on the other side of the valley, and then down here you get some magnificent views over the Forest of Dean, as it turns out to be. And then if I come over here, this is likely going to impress you even more so, because as we now look over to the left, look at that epic scene. The River Wye carving its way along the lush green forest and fields and meadows. And then if we come over here, you can see the river actually turning, the river bend there, very pronounced. The cliffs over there on the right side. I've made it down to water level, and there's a little guide here. I thought I would show you where I am, and the river sort of viewpoint that I was at just a couple of moments ago is up here somewhere. There's the incredible river that you could see with the horseshoe bend there, but you can see it also comes right the way around. It nearly encircles the viewpoint. But there is a weir down here, so I thought I would just walk a little further and see if I can cop a view of it. I had no idea there's actually a road down here, otherwise I may have driven down and done a bit of walking along the riverside rather than hiking down from the top of that viewpoint, which took me about 20-25 minutes. This is Symonds Yat East, and it has the feel of a tiny little village, which is exactly what it is. There's a few pubs and restaurants, people out enjoying a drink or two overlooking the river. There's also this really cool looking hand ferry that you can jump on board, and the captain, so to speak, will pull you across the river to the other side, which is pretty helpful because there's no bridges in the immediate area. However, if you walk about a mile down along the river behind where I'm pointing the camera, you will come to an old wooden rope bridge, and that bridge crosses the river at the point where England meets Wales, or Wales meets England. And that kind of tells you how close we are now from crossing from England into Wales, which is where we're going to be spending the rest of this series pretty much. I am going to call it a day with this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed my epic voyage along the River Wye. It continues in the next video, so please consider subscribing, really helps the channel, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. We will be heading for Monmouth and beyond. Catch you there.